but that by doing so, I will gradually rise to the most powerful committees in the House of Representatives. And whether the Speaker likes it or not, whoever the Speaker may be, there's nothing he or she can do about it. As long as my constituents continue to send me back, I will be there.
There were initially, and there was some discussion throughout the course of the summer to get to this point. This wasn't an easy process, arrived at overnight. And some of the early members on that bandwagon kind of found themselves ostracized back in 1984, did they not?
It's a lonely feeling to be 26 out of 122. I felt sure at that time that I was absolutely right. But when you look up and you see everybody else going a different direction and believing that you're wrong, that's a very lonely feeling. And gradually, over the years, a number of things happened within the House of Representatives that changed a lot of minds. So it culminated this summer, starting with the summer, end of the summer, with the bringing together of a number of groups that don't think alike, don't look alike, and don't sound alike on almost any issues. But at least on this one particular issue, we were together and we brought about that change. Now, we may never be together as a group again, but at least at one point in Mississippi's history, we were able to put aside whatever our philosophical differences were to bring about this change. And it must have meant that some eyes were opened over the last 3 years as to what we were saying in 1984 about the conditions under which we were all required to operate in the House of Representatives.
And we in the press choose to characterize this, in many cases, as the old guard versus the new. Was the line of demarcation that contrasting?
I would think that up until this point you were correct. The old guard were those who chose to follow the status quo for whatever reason. There were many reasons that they chose to do that. Now, I would call them the old guard. It was a system that had been in place for forever, it seemed. And I would say that they were the old guard. But the new guard that you all have called, have coined some of us who've been operating with the new system, are the rebels. We all merged. And I don't know where the old guard is now, to be honest about it. I don't know if you can distinguish them, because there was a lot of the old guard with us this time. In fact, we couldn't have made it without some members, a good number of the members of what we refer to as the old guard.
Let's take a break. We'll be back in just a moment.
What's happening now? Feeling a little down? Well, you've come to the right place for some laughs. So, how do you feel now, Roger?
Well, let me put it this way.
Yahoo! What's happening now?
What's happening now? Saturday night at 10:30 on WJTV 12.
Continuing our discussion, we're happy to have as our guest this afternoon Representative Edward Blackmon from Canton, who I might add many years ago, he and I were schoolmates up in...
A few years ago.
Canton, Mississippi. Representative Blackmon, another issue that Mississippians are going to be confronted with. By the way, I should note that Representative Blackmon serves on County Affairs and Judiciary B in the Mississippi House of Representatives. An issue that we're going to be confronted with that the Senate has already passed, and that's an additional tax, 5-cent per gallon tax on gasoline consumption. That's going to hurt some poor people.
It's going to hurt poor people. It's going to hurt industry, in my opinion. It's going to hurt just more than poor people. I think it will hurt all of us. At some point in our economic endeavors, it's going to impact upon us. The Senate passed a bill, I believe, on yesterday, and it provides for a 5%, 5 cent, that is, tax per gallon on gasoline at the pump. That means that your tax will go up. You'll be paying more for gasoline if that bill passes the legislative process. The House is considering a similar bill, and that bill will provide for financing of the highway program through bonds and perhaps a smaller tax on gasoline. I've heard the figure 2 cents. But in any event, those two measures are going to meet somewhere, and perhaps we're going to see something done one way or the other with them. That's for sure. It may pass as the Senate has indicated, or there may be some combination of the two bills that eventually make it into law.
Having noted that it's going to hurt some people, I assume, or presume, whichever, that you're against it.
I'm not in favor of it. I'd rather put it that way.
I'm not sure what that
means. That's a political position. I don't favor the bill as it now it stands from the Senate. I just cannot see us imposing that kind of tax on our citizens. We have industry that's going to be affected by it. We have jobbers that transport goods to and from markets that operate on our borders adjacent to Alabama, Tennessee, Arkansas. We have to compete with these people. And the jobbers are going to be hurt because if they're paying 5-cent additional tax, they're going to have to pass that cost on. And as they pass it on, it eventually will reach the consumers, which will be us. And we will lose some of that business because the people in Texas who are paying less for gasoline, the people in Arkansas, Tennessee, Alabama, they're going to get those jobs, and the taxes will go to Alabama and the rest of the surrounding states. I don't see that as being a reasonable remedy for what we are trying to do in this state.
It's also going to drive people out of Mississippi, especially on those port cities like Vicksburg and Natchez, who can run right across the river and get perhaps more inexpensive gas. And of course, gas tends to be a lot less expensive in Louisiana and other places than it is in this state already.
Yeah, we need now a viable highway program system to upgrade our system as it now stands. I just believe that there's a better way to do it, and that's why I said I was not in favor of the bill. I'm not necessarily totally against the concept. We can find a way to do it. Now, people are afraid and are running away from the term increased income taxes. That has been the traditional way that you raise revenue in this country. I am in favor of an income tax increase. That way, we would have a more equitable distribution of the burden of providing for these services as we've always done. Now, I certainly would support that kind of measure. In fact, if we don't have an income tax increase this year, we won't just not have a highway program. Our services, I think, would be drastically affected again. We had a severe cut last year, and from what I've heard from the economic soothsayers, those who can see into the future as to what our economic condition will be, they have indicated that we're going to also suffer some kinds of cuts this year.
Every year we talk about highways and what we need to do to build more roads, but the roads never seem to get built, and they never seem to get any better. And people complain, and they tear up their vehicles on those roads.
That's the way the system has operated, and I would agree with you. I do want to make one clarification, though. We here in central Mississippi have been blessed, for whatever reason. Call it good administration or just plain luck. The northern part of the state has suffered dearly. They have not gotten their just due, and for some parts of the southern part of the state have not gotten their just due. That could be a question of administration. I don't know, and I'm not saying that. It could be a question of what we have done in the legislature. We might have been derelict in our duties to address those kinds of problems. We have to address them. That's why I said we need a viable highway program. I don't agree with the governor that we need a centralized highway program. I don't think that that's it. I think the best remedies lie within the people. They can choose their own representatives and determine who they want to administer their highway program.
The governor has frequently been critical of the three-member highway commission, which kind of serves as the governing board over the construction of state roads. Your position on that?
Well, I don't necessarily agree with the governor that we ought to change in the manner that he suggests. I prefer the democratic process. I trust our people to select good people, just as they select our governor. The governor, if I were governor, I might say the same thing, though, because one of the objectives of being the governor of the state or holding any elected position is to collecting and gathering of all the resources that you can to do the kind of job that you think that you can do for your constituents. He has a much larger constituency than, of course, highway commissioners do. And I don't blame him for trying to focus attention on that area. But I don't necessarily agree with it.
Let's go on to another issue. Let's talk about a possible constitutional convention, which would be proclaimed to revise the old 1890 Constitution, a 96-year-old document that has by all accounts, been antiquated, and that just didn't happen. It's been antiquated for many, many years. Are you espousing the principle of having one, and what would you like to see included in such a call?
Well, I take antiquated to mean that it's old. The United States Constitution is old. But we don't, because it's old, we don't call the Constitutional Convention. We do go the amendment process. I prefer the amendment process. I don't necessarily favor a Constitutional Convention where we open the whole thing up, opening it up for gutting. I'll just give you some of the comments that have been made to me. We have a large segment of our population in this state have just begun to get into the mainstream of involvement. And it scares the heck out of a lot of us that our involvement might be short-lived, it might be curtailed, and our participation reduced through what may be happened through a constitutional convention process. For instance, the bill that passed the Senate today, I understand, provides for election of members to the Constitutional Convention, delegates that is, from the 122 House districts. We are in the House now, we only have 18 black members elected from the House district. Someone has said, well, we'll have an amendment which authorizes the governor to make 20 additional appointments to make sure that minorities and women are protected. Well, that means that we have a total of 142 delegates. He's not going to appoint 20 additional blacks, I'm sure of that. So we're going to have less representation there. What about females' involvement in that? I don't trust the convention process. We have a constitutional convention, and we have delegates already elected by way of the House of Representatives and the Senate. That's what we've been entrusted to do. I think the amendment process at this point in time in our history is the route that we ought to take. I don't think that we would fare much better than we are now by going the constitutional route.
Mm-hmm. Are you lobbying against it, or are you kind
of... At this point in time, I am speaking against it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mind coming out and saying that I'm against it. It may be an unpopular stance in some quarters of the state, but for my particular constituents, those people that I'm most close to and familiar with, we have just walked in the door, and they're trying to say we want to change the rules before we can take our seat. I want to enjoy the positions that we have now, the constables, the justice court judges, the school board members. Let these folk exercise some power. Let us see if we can right some of the things that have been wrong before you decide to tell us we're going to change the way you're playing and operating.
Well, inherent to some extent in what you say, and of course you never like to use the word conspiracy because it has such broad and general application, but it would appear that you would at least be somewhat nervous about the prospect that there is a conspiracy to erode the gains and growth that blacks have seen over the last few years.
Well, there are a lot of people right now saying, reduce the size of the House of Representatives, reduce the number of the size of the Senate. They're saying it right now. And it barely met defeat with the Governor's Committee this past summer. A constitutional convention could easily say that that's the way it should be. And those are saying, well, it won't impact on minorities, it won't impact on women. I tell you, anytime you reduce the opportunity, the number of opportunities there for full participation, then you do, there is a causal connection between reducing the impact and the fact that we would have in participation. So yes, I fear what could happen to us. I know they said the present Constitution inhibits our ability to bring an industry. That's not true. We inhibit our ability. The Constitution is a piece of paper that is interpreted year in and year out, day after day, by courts differently, all the time. Mm-hmm. The United States Constitution suffers the same fate. Depends on who the administration is, depends on who your Supreme Court is. We are no different. And all of the things that they say that are bad in there, like interracial marriages, no interracial
Jim
marriages.
Crow laws are what we're talking about.
Yeah, those kind of things. They may offend me, but I don't go to bed at night worrying about it. I don't wake up thinking about it.
You feel like the federal courts have adequately addressed those issues over the years?
The federal courts have addressed them. I don't say it's adequately addressed them. There are many things that we still can address. But I think that we have the means now for us to continue our progress in this state in terms of becoming full participants. Industry will come where there's enlightenment and where there's fairness. And that's a matter of the man and not the piece of paper.
Let's take a break. We'll be back in just a moment.
Sheer madness on the next electrifying episode of Fame.
I want that award. Mr. Deerenforth, you've got yourself a show.
What do you want me to do, count to 20 while you bat your eyelashes?
You couldn't count to 20 with your shoes off. I want you to get out there and be almost as good as I would have been.
Don't miss television's best, the next episode of the Emmy Award-winning Fame.
Saturdays at 5 on WJTV 12.
Wrapping up our conversation this afternoon with Representative Edward Blackmon from the town of Kent, Mississippi, up in Madison County, my hometown, and also his. Mr. Blackmon, this is a statewide election year, and we're apt to see, of course, many things happen. One of the things that has happened is the allowance by the voters of the governor to attempt to succeed himself. Without getting into that too much, what is your political future like?
Well, I'm going to be seeking office again, and from my district, I have not officially announced yet or qualified, but certainly I've enjoyed the past 3 years and some odd months of involvement in state government. I have not had everything to go my way, but not all has gone against me either. We've been, I think, successful in some of the areas that we've tried to be successful in. It's a very, I think, good area to be working in. It gives me great pleasure to participate in our system.
One of the things that's going to happen and have to happen quickly in the town of Canton is going to have to be trying to bring in jobs, to put people to work, to build up the economy, so to speak. Canton has been rather sluggish, going back all the way to the time that I went to school there. What can be done, and what do you think?
We're trying now to get our educational system in order in Canton. Canton is like any other part of the United States. As goes your educational system, so goes your economic progress. And in Canton, Madison County, we're dealing with that. There's been some items in the news of late concerning that. It's not going to be easy, but we're going to have to deal with it, and we're trying to deal with it in Canton. Of course, we're lucky and blessed by being located so close to the Jackson metropolitan area, and a good number of our citizens are employed in Hinds County. So we are not suffering as much as some of the areas a little farther north of us. But Canton has a great deal of many things to do to overcome, and I might add this: Canton on this week passed the Board of Aldermen and the mayor passed an ordinance declaring, setting aside a day that is for Martin Luther King's birthday. And of course, I think a year ago, 2 years ago, that would not have been possible. So we are becoming more enlightened as a group of people.
Well, you may recall a couple of years ago, the mayor up there at that time, Sidney Runnels, I believe, chose not to extend the key to the city to Mrs. King, who was visiting in our fair city. So that is indeed, I would imagine, an accomplishment.
Well, the mayor was at a program, memorial program honoring Dr. King just a few days ago. And he did participate and was in support of the King holiday in Canton. So time brings about change. These people, I don't think, are bad people. It's just that a lack of interaction with the different races brings about ignorance. And the more we interact, the more we learn about each other. And that is happening in Canton. I don't want to say Canton is a paradise, a panacea or something, but we're struggling to come together in Canton, and hopefully, as time passes, we'll bring about some more changes.
Well, we thank you very much for joining us this afternoon and at least briefing us on those legislative developments up to this point. And of course, as the session goes on, we'll perhaps get you back and get some updated comments on the status of things. That is the Sadler Report for this afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Walter Sadler. Have a good day.